Big Podcast.
Quick note before I get started. We are finishing out a year, going through a holiday season. A lot of people don't like the holidays for whatever reason. And this is a reminder to you, if you're thinking about taking a little time off, do it. Do what you need to do. However, if you are up for podcasting, this is a great opportunity to do that. There is somebody that considers you family. And because this is a weird time for people, that connection is important. Even if somebody's having a great time, gifts are often exchanged during this year. A lot of those gifts, electronics. A lot of those electronics, things that you can listen to podcasts on. So this is a great opportunity for you to get out there, podcast, release some episodes, connect with people, find new listeners, develop new connections. This is Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. My name is David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the website. Every Friday morning, New York City time, I've got a newsletter. It is called Big Podcast Insider. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is the audio edition of that newsletter. This is issue number 211. Here are the things that I'm talking about. The $158 podcast studio. How to get more listeners in Apple Podcast. The Mac Podcast, or McPodcast. How to make a $139 mic sound like a $3,500 mic with one tiny modification. Unlimited licensing for over 300,000 music tracks. A little podcast humor for you. I call this just browsing. Humorous to some people, not to others. Also some classified ads, things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make more money as a podcaster. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm. If you want to grow your podcast, get more listeners, have more connection with those listeners, you have got to have good audio. That is no longer an option. It is a requirement. If you don't have the quality of audio that you want, if your guests don't sound as good as you want them to, Riverside.fm is a great way to step up your audio. It's also a great way to do interviews. You're going to sound like you're in the same room. Your guests are going to sound great. You're going to sound great. Editing is easy. If you're into marketing your interviews, making it easy for your guests to promote what you do, Riverside's got a great option called AI Magic Clips. It goes through your long form audio, using the power of AI, finds what it thinks is interesting, chops up the clips for you, get it to your guests promote it, boom, you've brought an audience. I want you to try it for free. It's at riverside.fm. They're going to give you a couple hours. It's enough to get an interview, maybe 2 interviews in. You can use AI Magic Clips, the other tools that they've got to make you sound like you're in the same room as your guest, no matter where you are in the world. If you like it and you want to stick around, this is how to do it. You're going to go to riverside.fm. You're going to get your free account. To continue beyond your free trial, this is the discount code to use. It's going to get you 15% off. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That's riverside.fm, the discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. All right, let's get to it. I'm going to go from thing to thing to thing. Every single one of these things about podcasting, about growing your audience, about making a podcast that matters and attracts listeners to you. When I go from one thing to another, you are going to hear this sound. That's how you know if you want more information, the links to things that I'm talking about, go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. The $158 podcast studio. I am using it right now. I've been doing this all month, recording episodes of this podcast using a $99 mic, the Shure SM58, and a $59 interface. This one is the Focusrite Vocaster 1. I love this thing for webinars. I love it for live streaming. It's got 2 knobs on it. One of them is a headphone volume knob, a monitor knob, so you can hear yourself. The other is the strength of your signal. We'll call it gain, whatever. It makes it very easy when you're doing a live stream, a live recording, or just recording your podcast to get the signal you need and also to hear your guest. Now, this mic, the SM58, a classic mic, they're selling millions of them every year. Let me give you some behind the scenes of this. I've got a friend of mine in the audio business. I have not verified this, but he told me, and this is definitely true, this mic, it's been around, let's say 50 years, maybe a little more. Old technology, they have got it down to a science. They make them in Mexico. He says they cost about $5 to make. $5. Sell them to stores for $70. That's the wholesale price. The store sells them for $99. Everybody's making a little bit of money or a lot of money. We're talking millions and millions of mics. And it is a classic mic. Engineers love it. They know it's consistent. They know how it reacts. It is a great sounding mic, not only for your studio, But if you're doing any kind of live events, I use them all the time when we're doing live events because it has noise rejection, meaning it's a cardioid pattern. If I'm doing something on a busy trade show floor, in a club, something with a PA, it's going to reject everything but my voice. I mean, within reason. It's not like a studio environment. It's not like some of this AI vocal isolate kind of technology that we've got. But it's not going to pick up everything. If you look at old movies, remember Back to the Future? There's always like feedback in the mic. Shure is the one who invented the cardioid pattern. That's what stopped the feedback, or at least helped control it. Anyway, here's why I'm using the $158 podcast studio this month. 2 reasons. And these are things that I see podcasters doing all the time. One of 2 things. One, they try to cut cost on everything. Or the second, just the opposite of that. They buy the most expensive equipment that they can, giving the price of something way more credit than it deserves for improving the quality of a podcast. There is a middle ground. You can have a great quality podcast for not a lot of money. You can't just buy your way into a great podcast, but you do need to invest something if you want to compete. People say, oh man, my iPhone's got a mic. My AirPods have a mic. My laptop has a mic. No, that's not going to work. That's not good enough. Not at the level that podcasters are working now. Back 20 years ago, 2005, yeah, great. We were happy just to be here. But these days, and you see this with YouTube videos too, people are getting so good. And talk 20 years ago, there were kids that were not even born then that are doing podcasts, that are doing YouTube videos. These kids were handed a mic, an interface, and a YouTube account the moment they were born. They know the ins and outs of this stuff, and you've got to compete with that. And you can, because you've got life experience, you've got relationships, you've got something to say. It's not just about audio quality, but audio quality, a big part of it. If you want to go deeper into this philosophy, Steve Albini, you might know this guy, produced some Nirvana records, a lot of stuff in the 90s. Big time record producer. He passed recently, but still very influential in the music business. And I would argue influential in the podcasting business, certainly influential to me. He's got some lessons for podcasters that I have linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 201. It's going to give you a nice perspective on how to capture a moment in time without going overboard. Because that's what we've got, a moment in time. What I'm speaking to you right now is a moment in time that I've captured on tape. By the way, if you want to spend a little bit more money on the mic, not $99, but $139, and make it sound like a $3,500 microphone, keep listening. I've got that story coming up. Get that Steve Albini article. It's linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. Let's talk about Big Podcast Amp real quick. If you like my newsletter, if you like the podcast, you're going to love Big Podcast Amp, the audio monetization program. It's a personal coaching program. It's me working with you. I'm going to help you do 3 things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. 3, make more money with your podcast and also your podcasting skills. You would not believe how many people are willing to pay you for what you're doing for free to help them with their podcast. I'm talking about hosting skills. I'm talking about production skills. I'm talking about editing skills. There is more than you realize that you are doing that is very valuable, and you take it for granted. They do not. They've got no idea how to do it. Setting up feeds, no idea how to do that. Building a cheap studio for $158, no idea. You can get paid for this. You can make a lot of money. You can make a full-time living. I haven't had a job in 25 years. I've got all the details of how it works at bigpodcast.com/amp, bigpodcast.com/AMP. How to get more listeners in Apple Podcasts. There's a new OS operating system for iPhone. Have you downloaded it yet? If you have, you are going to find new category personalization for Apple Podcasts, meaning that podcasts are easier to find than ever. You get on Apple Podcasts, it's going to say, pick your favorite categories to get started. Well, I like comedy, I like news, true crime, business, education, history, TV and film, society and culture. You're familiar with those categories. Users get to pick those categories that they like, and then Apple Podcasts recommends podcasts to them. It's a step up from what we had before. People like this podcast also like this podcast. It's more like what YouTube does. A lot of people complain, there's no discovery in podcasting. Well, yes, there is. And there is also this, which is even more of that. Yet another way for people to discover your podcast. Here's the trick. You have to have the correct category selected for your podcast. Do you? You might want to go to podcastconnect.apple.com, check your listing there. What category is your podcast? Are you sure about it? Is Apple sure about it? I've got a link with more information to this story and also how you can make sure your podcast is in the right place. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. McPodcast. I want you to steal this idea. If you've ever traveled the world, a familiar sight for Americans, speaking to you Americans, but really this is anywhere in the world. McDonald's, we all recognize the colors, the golden arches. Speaking of traveling, Sedona, Arizona, the one McDonald's in the world that does not have the golden arches. They've got a turquoise arch. It's I guess we call it historic city. There's some zoning in place. It does not allow McDonald's to use the golden arches, big golden M that everybody's familiar with. So it's turquoise. That's one of the approved colors. It's actually very cool to see. People travel just to see it. That's what can happen when you localize something. Another related story. I'm vegetarian. So a Big Mac, not on my menu. I was talking to my buddy, an audio producer out of Pune, India, Shrikant Joshi. He said, oh man, you love India because the Big Macs here, they've got potato patties. They don't eat beef in India. Well, some people do, but you're not going to find beef at McDonald's there. They are culturally sensitive to the people of India. And there are a lot of things that McDonald's does like this. I've got a link to a lot of them, a lot of local items that you're going to get from McDonald's. That got me thinking how important it is for us to modify our delivery and content to fit the needs of the people that we are serving. Now, just to be clear, podcast rule number 1, if you see my rules for podcasters, you'll know this. Fly your flag. I say it all the time. If you haven't seen those rules, I've got them linked there at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. But I want you to understand this. Even if you fly your flag, you need to understand that you're going to have more success reaching people if you are skillful in how you do this. If I were to go to a Mary Kay Cosmetics convention, I'm wearing pink because everybody there is wearing pink. If you're under 40, look it up. Under 50, maybe. The pink Cadillac that Mary Kay used to give her cosmetic salespeople when they sold a lot of things. That is how they identify. McDonald's, I've been talking about that. They identify with gold or yellow and red. They have colors that are on every restaurant with the exception of Sedona, Arizona. I'm not telling you to play small. Bring your full self. Let them feel you. They can deal with it. What I am saying is that if you are sensitive to people and respectful of people and skillful in your delivery of your message, you can tailor it in a way where you are still flying your flag, but that message can be better received. Sometimes we've got to modify our approach. And that always means talking to people in their language. If you want more thoughts on this, if you want to see these local items from McDonald's around the world, I think it's going to give you some thoughts on what you can do to reach the audiences that you want to. I've got everything linked. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. How to make a $139 mic sound like a $3,500 mic with one tiny mod. The Neumann U87. By the way, you're like, Neumann? What does he talk about? Some people call it Neumann, Neumann. You pronounce it Neumann. It's a legendary voiceover mic. It's often imitated. It costs about $3,500. You don't have that kind of money for a mic? All right. I got your solution to get one, kind of. It's a $10 single capacitor mod that you put on a $139 mic, the AKG Perception model. It gets you shockingly close to this $3,500 mic. I've got the graphics, the data. You're not going to believe this. People are going to say you sound like $1 million or at least $3,500. Man, what did you do? How do you sound so good? We won't tell. If you do this, I want you to reach out to me via Blue Sky, by the way. I've got the link at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, the plans at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. It's a pretty easy mod. You're going to need to know how to solder. If you're nervous about that, you can do this for $50 total. These mics, $40 or $50 used. You can find them everywhere. $10 modification. Done. I've got the links on how to do it. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. Unlimited licensing for 300,000 music tracks. That's a lot of tracks. 300,000 premium royalty-free music tracks and sound effects with unlimited licensing. One-time fee, $99. I've used the service for 4 or 5 years, had pretty good results. A lot of the music that you hear at the very beginning of these episodes of Build a Big Podcast, where it's doom, 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 big podcast.
Big podcast.
That's from this service. It's called Audio Hero. They've got some very cool, quirky music that's great for fiction podcasts, period pieces. Also, a ton of options for nonfiction. Like I said, I'm opening a lot of these episodes with stuff from Audio Hero. You're going to get unlimited downloads of their royalty-free music library and sound effects. There are over 300,000 tracks there. You're going to find something that you like. It's licensed for all media, and it's licensed worldwide, meaning if you had a TV show and it went on broadcast television, if you did a movie and it goes into theatrical release, you're licensed. $99, one-time fee, never pay again. And that's in perpetuity, meaning now and forever. The interesting thing about this tool, it's got an advanced AI search tool that will find just the track that you need. Meaning, if you've got a track that you like and you can't get it licensed, let's say it's a Britney Spears track, no way is she going to license that to you, or no way you can afford it. Maybe both. Upload Britney into this service, it's going to spit you out some stuff that they've got. Here's a pop track that's very similar. It's not Britney, but it's close. If you want to see how it works, there's a 60-day money-back guarantee. I've got this special link for you to get this lifetime deal at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Like I said, I've used it 4 or 5 years. A lot of the logos that I use at the very front of this episode, that is coming from this service. Well worth it for $99. Get the link, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. A little humor for you. It's perfect timing because it's just around the holidays. The end of the year is a great time to find deals on mics and other podcasting gear. But before you buy anything to replace your current equipment, I want you to ask yourself these 3 questions. What are your specific audio needs and goals? Determine what you want to achieve with your new microphone. Are you looking for better sound quality, better noise reduction, or a particular type of sound? I talked about the SM58, the $99 mic that I'm talking into right now. My normal mic, about $500 or so. Electro Voice RE20. It's a great mic for the studio, but it's $500 something. I'm not going to cart it around with me like I will the SM58. The SM58, ding it up, it breaks, it cost me $100 to replace it. That's the worst that's going to happen. And it's a fine mic. It sounds great. As good? Arguably not. But it's going to get you 80, 90% there, and it's going to do it for 1/5 of the price. So think about that, your audio needs and goals. Related, what's your budget? What features are essential within that range? I like the SM58 for $99 because, for one, the price makes it budget conscious for if I do lose it, or if it gets stolen, broken, whatever, it's not that big a deal, but it gets me what I need. It's also very reliable. That's essential when you're doing something in the field. Probably more reliable than the $500 mic I've got in my studio. This thing is built rock solid. That's why they use it in every club, comedy clubs, music clubs. They use it in churches. Everybody and his brother's got an SM58. If you don't, it's a good mic to have. 3rd question, how does a new microphone integrate with my current setup? I talked about the audio interface that I'm using for this episode, the Focusrite Vocaster 1. It doesn't accept a USB mic. I've got to have an XLR mic if I want to work with that interface. You got to think about that if you're going to upgrade your mic. How does your new microphone integrate with your current setup? That is important. How does it work with your software? How does it work with your environment? I've got all these linked, and a funny joke, it's visual, about browsing microphones. Both those things at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 211. Classified ads for you. These are things that help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make more money with your podcast, make a podcast that people care about. Book Like a Boss will help you automate your guest booking. If you're sick of missing appointments, if you're sick of your guest missing appointments, Book Like a Boss will handle everything. Automated guest scheduling. If the guest is on a different time zone than you are, that's not going to be a problem because it's going to figure that differentiation for you. Automatic reminders, text messages are sent to guests, emails are sent to guests, text messages and emails are sent to you. And also it integrates with all email and calendar software. You can try it for free. I've got a special link for you, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. pCloud, lifetime storage. Don't lose your hard work. Or if you're working with producers, if you're working with somebody who wants to listen to your stuff before it goes out, this is a great way to send them a big, big file. Are you backing up your podcast? You need to. I got 10 gigabytes for you free via pCloud. You'll find that link at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Hey, if you're ready for more, you want to get more people to your podcast, you want to make more money with your podcast, you want to make a better podcast. I've talked about Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program. Come work with me, man. You and I, we're going to do it together one-on-one, as well as with a group of other podcasters that are working just as hard as you are. It's less money than you would think. I've got more information, bigpodcast.com/amp. Also, when you go to bigpodcast.com, I've got the Podcast Growth Toolkit. You can subscribe to this podcast, Android, iPhone, RSS. One click is all it takes. So many resources at bigpodcast.com. Do go there. If you want to work with me in a deeper way, one-on-one, that is there too. Everything at bigpodcast.com. Thank you very much. I'm probably going to have one more episode before the year ends, maybe two. Regardless, let me say this. I appreciate you being here with me this year. I'm looking forward to the next year. Bigger, bolder, and more impactful things. That is coming, not just from here, not just from me, but I'm going to help you do that as well. So go to bigpodcast.com. Let's continue to work together, either through this podcast or through something more, and we'll make that happen. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.